Hey, everybody. Steve and I just wanted to say thanks for listening to the podcast, and we hope that you enjoyed episodes 1 and 2 as much as we did. The episode you're about to listen to is a great conversation with our guest Brad Murdoch, covering a wide range of topics related to enterprise sales and marketing. Unfortunately, we did have some technical problems and lost the video recording as well as Brad's high-quality audio recording. So we had to revert to the backup audio recording, which is a little bit less high quality. The conversation with Brad was so good that we hope that you grant us a little leeway on this episode. We're going to switch to a different app for recording on the next episode, and so we won't have this problem. Thanks for listening, and enjoy episode 3.
Can I get the icon in cornflower blue flower?
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of Can I Get That Software in Blue podcast. We hope you like the first 2 episodes. We've been getting a lot of good feedback. Apparently, we're trending in Thailand of all places. We're one of the top technology podcasts in Thailand this week. Don't know why, but that's what's going on. And I did actually get some emails from a couple people who decided to buy DraftKings stock after the last episode, which, by the way, is not at all what we intended. This is not a podcast where we are trying to convince you to buy any stocks. We do talk about companies and stocks, and if you'd like to buy them, go for it. But we're not financial advisors. We're not here to tell you what to buy. But it was funny. I mean, they did actually email me that, and I was like, but the stock went from like 60 to 45 since episode 2 came out. So, like I said, you don't necessarily want to listen to us on stock recommendations.
Hey, Chad, maybe we're moving markets, just not in the direction we think.
That's right. That's right. What we should do is pump up a stock and then short it ourselves because it's going to go down after we talk about it. But we're definitely not going to do that because I don't want to go to jail.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, we're joined today by a guest named Brad Murdoch. He is the Executive Vice President of Strategy and Product at Lightbend, which is the company behind the ACA framework. Is it ACA or ACA?
ACA.
Which is an open source distributed computing framework. You probably have never heard of it before unless you're really deep into the world of enterprise software, but you have used it if you've ordered a Starbucks or watched something on Disney Plus or are listening to this podcast on Spotify. You've been a recipient of using their software. Brad's also on the board of Permission.io, where users truly own their data and get paid crypto for sharing it. Brad, thanks for coming to the show today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Chad and Steve. I have thoroughly enjoyed the first couple of episodes, so it's an honor to be in number 3.
Brad has a long history in the industry. He's worked at 5 different startups since 2004. I know him from his JBoss days, as he was one of the early employees at JBoss, which got acquired by Red Hat. And then we worked together at a security startup a few years back. And every time I talk to Brad, I always learn something new and interesting. He's got such a long history in the software world, having worked across various roles in marketing, product management, corporate strategy, and business development. So it's not every day you get to talk to somebody with his knowledge and view of the world of enterprise software. So I'm really looking forward to this episode. And let me just start with one of the most important questions, Brad. Did you have anything? Did you try any new interesting scotches during the lockdown? What was your main go-to? Were you like going with like comfort, like the things that you normally have, or were you branching out and trying new stuff?
So there was a little of both, actually, Chad. So the comfort, the old Lafroig is still a go-to in my drinks cabinet. But my father-in-law had kindly bought me a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue, which had been sitting unopened, waiting for a special occasion. And I decided that being locked up for 9 months in my home office was special enough.
That's nice. That's nice. Well, you could probably tell from Brad that he's from Scotland, so he's been to every Scotch distillery out there, probably. And this is our first podcast that we're recording and filming at night, and that affords us the ability to have a drink while we're filming. So here's to you, gentlemen. I've got my Basil Hayden here. Steve, what are you working with?
Cheers. I'm working with a Brook Loddick, the classic laddie. It's one of my favorites.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Lovely. I have some California Stag's Leap. Nice. And it is light outside, but that's because I'm recording in California. It is actually the evening, folks.
All right.
Just so we're clear with everybody.
This should be interesting. Yeah.
And just so everyone knows, if you are listening to this podcast, whenever we can drink on this, we will. So,
hey, even if we record in the morning, I guess.
If it's a day off, why not? It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Yeah.
Well, you guys know, if you've listened to our last few episodes, that we always start off with a 10K breakdown, talking about some company that we find interesting. It's not always one that we have personally invested in. Today, we're going to be talking about Snowflake. And this is not something that I've personally invested in. I don't know about you guys, if you want to say or not.
I have not yet.
I can say I have not invested in them.
Just so people have a little background on Snowflake, because it might not be as well known to a lot of our listeners as Zoom or DraftKings was. Snowflake is a cloud-based data warehouse product, and it's competitive with other data warehouse products like, let's say, Redshift from Amazon or Teradata or those types of products. And it runs fully in the cloud. It's hosted in all three of the major American clouds, AWS, Azure, and GCP. So their customers can kind of pick and choose which cloud that software runs in. They don't even have an on-premise version, from my understanding. It's cloud first, cloud native. So as of January 2021, they had around 4,000 customers, which was almost double from what it was a year previously. So they're doubling their customers, at least for the last year. Let's see some interesting numbers. They had significant growth. So their last revenue in January of 2021 was around 600 million, and that's up from 264 million the year before. So they more than doubled their revenue in a year. Their losses were similar. They lost around 540 million, and the year before that they lost around 350 million. So as a percentage of revenue, their losses are actually going down, which is interesting. They IPO'd at $125 recently. They immediately jumped to 250 on the first day, I think, and peaked around 400, and it's been falling ever since. It's sitting right around 200 now, which imputes a market cap around $60 billion or around 120 times sales, which is really, really high. And
Really
considering that it was about 240 times sales a couple months ago, that's really, really high. So that's a little rich for my blood. I mean, that's why I haven't bought any of it, but that's obviously the market loves it.
That's absolutely the case. We've heard quite a lot over the last 12 months with the market is not the economy, when the market has been doing great, even though the economy is obviously struggling. It's also the same when we start looking at tech stocks. Steve and I were just talking off the air about Rob Bearden, who's the CEO of Cloudera. They have posted about just under 900 million in revenue, so 150% of what Snowflake does. But they are about 4 times their previous year's revenue in terms of their market cap, right?
Yeah.
Their market cap's 3.5 billion, whereas Snowflake, for less revenue, is 60 billion. And it's like, there's such a disconnect there. It's astonishing. Oh, Cloudera, I am a stockholder, and it is profitable, whereas I am not a Snowflake stockholder for the same reason you pointed out, Chad. It's like, wow, that's awfully rich, even though, as we're probably going to talk about, I think it's a great company with a great opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, they mentioned in their annual report, like in the first paragraph, how their platform eliminates data silos, and we made some notes about how pretty much every company that deals with data says that, like they all break down data silos. But I don't think that's a technology problem anymore. I used to. Now I think that's a people and process problem. It's not a technology issue. I don't know if you guys agree.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I noticed that too. That was like the first bullet point they had in multiple sections of their 10K. And Brad, I was going to ask you, just from a marketing point of view, like, why is this the thing that they want to lead with when everybody else says the same thing too? Like, that's not really a differentiating factor, really. So why would you lead with that?
The positioning that Snowflake have been taking is that they are truly cloud native. They have started in the cloud, and they have been true, and they remain true to that. And that by being truly cloud native with their technology, that it gives them massive advantages over any other approach when it comes to being able to do what you say everybody else claims, which is break down those data silos. They actually seem to be able to do it, right? And I'm not saying that other people that claim can't do it, just that it is a lot easier if you start your technology journey with the view that you are working in this fully distributed multi-cloud environment and stuff is just available to you. And so I think that is part of why the appeal is so much, that the market is realizing that actually, I know the cloud has been around forever, at least 15 years in terms of investor speak, but it's like they're finally waking up to the fact that this is actually the way that all computing is going, and that Snowflake's already there and their competitors are not.
Why does being in the cloud help them break down silos better than not being in the cloud?
Well, it's not so much just being in the cloud, Chad. I don't think. I think it's the way that they talk about it, and as you say, they do lead with this in their investor presentations. Is that all of their technology is founded on the assumption that you're working in effectively a single distributed computing environment, and everything that they have built assumes that they are able to access that data at any time. And the trick is making it work. And you mentioned that they've got 4,000 customers. Another thing in their investor presentation that I thought was fascinating is that they talk about that they're seeing on average 777 million queries a day. So that means that each customer on average is doing 187,000 queries a day.
They're using the product.
They're using the product, right?
Yeah.
They are using the product, and somehow or other, that says a lot to me. It suggests that they're successful in obviously an API driven approach, because you don't have 187,000 analysts doing one query a day, right? It's like this is programmatic hitting up the data, but also that they have probably been very successful with migrations of getting existing applications and existing data into their environment. Otherwise, those numbers wouldn't hold up.
I've noticed too that, the fact that we just talked about customers are actually using the product. I think there's a relationship between an architect and a developer and just a standard kind of IT person these days being more price conscious of what they're paying for what they're getting. And with Snowflake, the way they charge, based on my understanding, is it's resource-based usage. So or resource-based pricing. So you pay for what you use. And if I'm a customer of Snowflake versus a traditional data warehouse that might have charged per cores or based on RAM, I might feel like I'm getting more for my money. Even if it's the same price, I know now what I'm paying for. I can see how much data is in there. I can see how many people are querying it and what they're doing with it. Whereas an old data warehouse, I feel like it earns that kind of old data warehouse nomenclature because they just kind of sit there. Sure, there's power users, but nowadays I kind of know what I'm paying for and I know what I'm getting out of it. And I think that's only going to continue as cloud just continues to dominate the software world. They also have a feature called time travel, which I don't know what it does, but as part of the standard edition, you get 1 day of time travel. If you upgrade to enterprise, you get 90 days of time travel. That sounds awesome.
Oh, time travel allows you to run a query as if it were at that point in time. So like all your data is versioned based on time. So you can go back and say, if I had run this query last week, what would the results have been?
It's a very cool feature. It does remind me when I'm writing my first 10K that I'm going to include time travel as one of the features of whatever product I've got.
A recurring topic that happens on this show is this concept of multi-cloud. And I totally understand why a vendor like Snowflake would want to be multi-cloud. And, I'll just quote from their 10K here. Our platform delivers a consistent product experience across regions and public clouds. With a global multi-cloud strategy, organizations can optimize for the best features and functionality each public cloud provides without becoming overly reliant on a single public cloud provider. So I understand why Snowflake would be multi-cloud themselves, because their customers might be all in on AWS or Azure or whatever. But do you see many customers going for a multi-cloud strategy themselves?
I think the term is slightly overloaded in that we've got the reality of multi-cloud with the enterprise, which is that almost every major enterprise will have contracts with more than one cloud vendor. They may have the majority in one camp, but they will almost certainly have different applications, different use cases where they've got multiple clouds. I was talking to one of our customers recently, and they said they literally had 200 different cloud contracts. And yes, that's multi-cloud.
Yeah.
But for a single application to be multi-cloud, how many people really need that? I don't think there are that many applications where a single application would need to be multi-cloud. Now, if you're looking at global data warehousing where the whole value proposition is no silos, maybe you do need that. But I'm not sure.
I haven't seen it in my travels yet. People do talk multi-cloud. They talk about risk adverse and having multiple vendors so that you can play them off of each other with price and things like that. But I mean, as a developer and architect in my background, the idea of trying to build an application that is multi-cloud and how do I monitor that thing? How do I maintain it? How do I troubleshoot it? No, thank you. So I think as developers and architects, there's probably some hesitance to go and build a true multi-cloud application. In fact, when I talk to companies that do have multiple cloud vendors that they use, it's usually this suite of applications runs in this cloud provider and this suite runs in that cloud provider, and rarely shall the two meet, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and it even goes down to the teams. So we have our Azure team and our AWS team or our GCP team, and they build the skill sets on that cloud provider, and they're not directly transferable. There are differences between them. So I just don't see it. I think one of the things that caught my eye with this whole multi-cloud strategy for Snowflake is if they are doing something behind the scenes that would cause them to move data between clouds or even regions within the clouds, like data transfer and storage fees are going to bite them. And so as they grow, if they don't have profitable pricing today, which they probably don't, based on what I've heard and read during my research, I don't know how many customers they need in order to become profitable, but they have to be very careful when they grow that to make sure that, these data transfer and storage fees don't eat them alive. Because that's one thing that has become more apparent to me in selling monitoring solutions, observability solutions, is these costs add up. And so that's another reason not to build applications that are across clouds if you can avoid it. I do see a margin battle happening, like it's going to become more prevalent. I think more and more people are going to be talking about this, but it's not a month that goes by that one of the cloud providers doesn't lower the cost of something that they offer. And all of these companies that are building their entire business on these cloud providers are at the behest of what they want to do day to day when they change their prices up or down. And if you build a business that is relying on like a certain economy of scale to turn profitable, like there is a huge risk that you may never get there because people will beat you to it. Or like you said in there, and like they said, one of the cloud providers could just stand up another service. And it's kind of interesting because if you think about like what happens in Alibaba in China, Alibaba is not allowed to sell their own products on their store. I wonder if there's someday in the future legislation coming where if you run a cloud service, you're not allowed to sell software on top of it, similar to that kind of pro-competitive legislation, I should say.
Well, I know one of the topics that Brad wanted to discuss tonight was the whole Epic versus Apple lawsuit. And maybe this is a good segue into that because obviously that's what's going on there, right? Epic doesn't want to pay the 30% tax for Apple's marketplace, essentially, right? For in-app payments, Apple charges 30% commission on that. And Epic said, we don't want to do that. So now there's a lawsuit.
Full disclosure, I should say that both Apple and Epic use ACA, our distributed computing framework.
Yeah.
Apple is a customer, Epic is not.
Okay.
So take my comments with that. There's no bitterness whatsoever towards Epic in my following comments.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you that I don't understand why there's an argument here. I think Apple's done a particularly poor job of articulating the fact that this is our business and we can do it if we want to. And if you don't want to play in our sandpit, go play somewhere else. There's nothing wrong with positioning this as this is a commercial platform. It's your on road to the iOS superhighway, and we built it, and therefore we're going to charge the toll.
Yeah.
And thinking about enterprise software in general, we are in a world of marketplaces, and maybe Apple set the tone when they first did this with the App Store back in the mid 2000s. But everybody charges 30% for your marketplace. I was talking to Datadog yesterday. I didn't even know they had a marketplace. Guess what their tax is? 30%. It's like this is industry standard, and if you don't want to pay the tax, don't go on the marketplace.
You're absolutely right. I mean, but I think that we can look back and say the same thing about railroads like 150 years ago. And that's where those laws come from, is just bad behaviors in the railroad market. And generally, I would say you're right. But, when I was researching this topic, I listened to somebody talking about these emails that Apple people wrote about Netflix, because Netflix had made a decision to stop allowing people to pay for their Netflix subscription through the Apple app, because they would have to give 30% of it to Apple. So now you have to go to Netflix's website, pay for it there, and then you can use the app on iOS devices, right? And when that happened, there was all these emails flying around inside of Apple, like asking people, should we retaliate against Netflix for doing this? I forget the actual words they used, but they were basically asking, like, do we need to go find a way to make Netflix pay for what they're doing? And I find that behavior to be truly despicable. I mean, if I'd been a CEO, I would have fired that person immediately just to avoid the lawsuits that kind of talk can bring. That's crazy. You
It
can't
is
punish
crazy.
someone for them making a decision that's right for themselves. That's totally nuts. So that type of bad behavior, I just don't really like.
There is another app that I use all the time, which is Audible. And for the longest time, I could not buy audiobooks through the Audible app on iOS. And then one day it just changed. I never looked to see why, but one day it changed. So I imagine that something happened there where Audible either decided that it was okay or what, but now I can just buy audiobooks through the app rather than having to wait and go to the browser or open it on my phone.
Yeah, they probably made some sort of calculated decision, and maybe they
Yeah.
A/B tested to see if people were more likely to buy.
Yeah.
Even giving 30% to Apple, they were going to make
Yeah.
more money that way. It's probably something like that.
As a gamer, I can say that with the Epic versus Apple thing, I'm bummed out. I'm disappointed that like Epic's doing this. I get kind of their reasons why, and if you follow a certain trail of logic, you can understand where they're coming from. But at the same time, like you said, Brad, it's a world of marketplaces. If you don't want to run on their marketplace, then go build your own. Like there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But we all know now it's a massive investment. They know that. That's why they'd rather fight it out in court and pay lawyers than rather pay the developers. So I just think that ultimately the person or the people that lose here is the consumer, because now they have these experiences that they were getting that they're no longer getting. And I think people are fickle. Like if this goes on too long, people may just forget about all these games that use or the Epic produces and move on to the next one, right? That's willing to pay the Apple tax and just step into the void.
Well, Epic makes like 90+% of their revenue from one game. So
Yeah.
it's just that's it. That's the game.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's not like they're suggesting it should be free. I mean, Epic are suggesting 12% is the right tax.
Yeah. Based on what?
Based on what exactly? There's no question that anti-competitive question and your railroad analogy, Chad, kind of makes sense, because is it fair that they're locked out? Well, they're not actually locked out. They just need to pay the tax. But I get how I get the argument. I'm just not convinced by it. What I'm most interested in, Chad, is what it will do for the other marketplaces if Epic wins.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, AWS Marketplace, Azure Marketplace, Google Cloud, guess what? 30% across the board.
Well, not just AWS Marketplace, but third-party sellers selling
Everything.
on Amazon,
Yeah.
competing against Amazon, all that stuff. It's the same problem with Spotify. People who want to pay for premium content on Spotify, can you buy it through the Spotify app? Or they don't want to do that because then they got to give 30% to Apple. Whereas Apple can sell premium paid content and they don't have to pay that 30% to anybody else. So
Yeah.
it is a little interesting to build the framework and sell on it. Who knows? You're absolutely right. This lawsuit is going to could change everything. Right. I wanted to go back, since you were talking about the risk factor section of the 10K and how it's 25 pages long. I did note two interesting ones that didn't seem to be pure boilerplate. The more of these 10Ks that you read, you see a lot of them they list a lot of the same risk factors. And especially now with COVID-19, we don't know what's going to happen. Could damage our business. We don't know how. But there were two that stood out, and this is a topic that I know Steve was really interested in diving into. So this is a good segue. I'm going to quote from the 10K here. Failure to effectively develop and expand our sales and marketing capabilities could harm our ability to increase our customer base and achieve broader market acceptance of our products and platform. That was one risk factor that they pointed out. The other one said, sales efforts to large customers involve risks that may not be present or that are present to a lesser extent with respect to sales to smaller organizations. So they're basically saying we might not be able to grow our sales organization fast enough. That's going to harm our growth rate. And also, a lot of our sales are to large customers, and those just present a bigger risk because there are fewer of them. If some of them fall through, it hurts us a lot more.
Yeah. So, Brad, I'm curious to get your take on this. Like, we're kind of living through this transition of traditional enterprise sales blending with the product-led strategy. And I take a lot of my cues for where I think the enterprise software market's going from consumer software.
Sorry, Steve. Sorry. Can you define a product-led strategy for?
Product-led strategy is Spotify. I've never talked to a salesperson at Spotify, never talked to an employee, but I use their service and I happily give them $15 a month to use their service. Been doing that for years. I love it. I don't want to talk to a salesperson. And if they ever came out with a product that required me to talk to a salesperson, that's a huge barrier. But that's the consumer expectation. In enterprise software, if you look at companies like Datadog, where they were the up and coming observability vendor, and they got a lot of their customers early days from people just finding the app, advertising, developers, DevOps, SRE folks going in and starting to use it. And later they started building their sales team. That's from my outside looking in understanding. And my company, Grafana, has the same type of strategy. My previous company has a similar strategy where it's like you put the product out there and it's that field of dreams model. If you build it, they will come. And so I'm wondering, like, are we moving slowly but surely to a world where enterprise software starts to reflect today's consumer software, where the need for salespeople starts to diminish and diminish and diminish, eventually where procurement's automated, legal's automated, there's well-defined discount bands for the tiers as you go up. And, at that point, what role does an enterprise software salesperson play in this world of B2B sales?
I know exactly what you mean. And I think your Spotify example is a good one. And there are certain classes of software that's used in the enterprise where that fits very closely. And the poster child for that, I think, is Atlassian.
Yeah.
Right? $2 billion revenue company now. And I'm still not sure that they've hired an enterprise sales rep. I mean, they maybe hired their first one recently, but it's like it's entirely product led. I don't think most enterprise software can exist like that. Even going back to Snowflake, looking at Snowflake's stated strategy, it's the pincer movement, right? They want to do the product led with free trials to be able to have, data engineers and analysts be able to use and get the experience and see some value. But they've got this top down enterprise sales driven model, and they're very proud of their 77 customers that are paying them $1 million a year.
Yeah.
And you don't get 77 customers paying you $1 million a year without an enterprise sales force. It doesn't happen through product-led strategy. I think we've also seen it before. All three of us have seen this before. We've all worked for or are working for professional open source companies where our product-led strategy is the ultimate, where the vast majority of the value is available to someone without having to pay you 1 cent.
Yeah.
It's not a free trial. You can use it in production if you want, right? And
That's right.
so we still need enterprise salespeople to be able to translate that into our businesses. I do think that there are models that with cloud services being your monetization vehicle, and more enterprises getting comfortable with the concept that, hey, we're going to spend $100 million a year this year on all of our cloud services, and X% of it is going to one of the cloud providers, and Y% of it is going to all the other services that I run on it. And we see some big bets on that type of behavior by people like IBM buying Red Hat. They didn't buy it. They bought Red Hat for OpenShift and the ability to be able to do these large scale kind of private marketplace deals where anything you run runs on OpenShift wherever you want to deploy it. And so in that instance, how much selling are you doing? There's a lot of buying that goes on. The buying behavior is definitely different. So I do see the kind of increased acceptance of cloud service as your consumption vehicle for your enterprise software. That will continue to drive behavior away from that kind of classic enterprise sales effort, I think.
I think this product-led strategy leads me to believe that a lot of the pre-sales efforts that you normally would spend to acquire that customer can now be done by the product itself if it's a really good user experience. And then a lot more time for the solution architect pre-sales folks will probably be spent in driving adoption. So go and expand that account, get them to use more and more of our software. And that's what the cloud providers do. And so you have these two competing things. Like there's the consumer sales or the consumer software adoption process, which is no salespeople. And then the enterprise one, B2B software, but then there's the cloud providers as well. And I just wonder if over time, maybe that product-led strategy takes up like the SMB mid-market, but there's no reason a big strategic customer can't also go and try a free product and then, start to build on it and then eventually hit a threshold where someone at the company gets notified to say, hey, this customer is now spending X dollars with you. It's time to engage them to see if they'll spend more, right? Get them to adopt more of the software. And so maybe that's what eventually, like that's one of the phases of evolution we go through. Is like more and more companies implement these thresholds where they then engage, but they don't until that, the usage gets to a certain level.
I think you're exactly right on that, Steve. And I've had a few conversations recently with some of our customers that basically their entire approach as to whether they would continue to engage with us or not was whether we were in a particular marketplace. Because if we were and we could do a private offer for them, then they already had everything else ready to go. And if we weren't, they were not going to go at all. And that's kind of also going back to our marketplace, the power of the marketplace, right? But it's like once you get into that buying mindset that, hey, we are going to buy things that fit within this model. And if our developers or our data analysts or our data scientists come to us and they say, hey, we love this software and it's available in the way that we currently buy, boom, done. But if it's not, boom, done, you're out as well.
Yeah, you're out. You're out. Exactly. Well, you could say that too with FedRAMP. Like FedRAMP is one of those things. You either have it or you don't. And if you don't, then you're locked out of a certain class of opportunities.
So, Brad, just as a thought experiment, let's say with your current company, Lightbend, if you were given a constraint of not hiring salespeople and SAs, like what would you do differently from a product point of view, given that it's such a technical type enterprise infrastructure product?
So that's a great question, because the answer is we would look to monetize in a different way. Instead of enterprise subscriptions, we would look to build a cloud service that could be monetized by a product-led strategy. And that's, strangely enough, exactly what we're doing. It's not that we won't still have enterprise salespeople. It's not still that we won't try to look for those opportunities where people are leveraging our core open source as part of their development strategy. But we need to be able to be in a position where we can make it more consumable, so that people can be able to adopt it at scale much, much, much easier. This whole discussion is very germane to me right at this moment, because that's actually what we're living through. It's not that we won't have salespeople, but just that the opportunity that we believe going forward is one that will be more driven by a product-led strategy than by enterprise sales.
Yeah. So again, it's that pincer move of product and sales coming together. And I just watched Tenet last night with my brother-in-law who hasn't seen it. Chad, I noticed last night there was like things I was picking up on. This is my 5th time watching it, I think. I'm still noticing new things.
Well, that's because it doesn't make sense the first 3 times you watch it.
With this idea of product-led growth and people coming to the product on their own, right? Either through word of mouth or searches or whatever it is, however they get there. I sign up for a cloud product right now, and I don't have to talk to procurement. I sign some standard EULA, and I'm accepting that EULA on my company's behalf, but I never talk to a lawyer about it. And so that's part of the reason why I think this is trending in that direction. And I'm just wondering, like, is there a way where we can start automating some of the procurement processes to where companies basically have a B2B marketplace, just like we have a B2C marketplace with Apple and the Google marketplace for apps? Like, isn't there a possibility that we could have an enterprise marketplace? You could argue that we already do with clouds and those marketplaces. And maybe that's actually the answer, is that's where we start to offer our softwares on the marketplaces. We pay the tax, but that buys us not having to invest in a lot of procurement. And it also buys the customer that same benefit where they don't have to invest in as much procurement as they used to. And maybe even the legal costs go down over time as well, because these are standard contracts and we're just accepting them on the behalf of the company. I don't know if you guys are looking at certain strategies there to automate procurement, even at the $1 million plus level where you're doing these big enterprise deals.
We've invested in getting into a couple of the major cloud marketplaces with one of our products. And the biggest reason why we did it was to ease the buying process. And that is procurement and legal are often the long pole in the tent, as you both know. It's like you get a customer, they love it, and then it just takes forever because it has to go through legal and procurement. If you are an approved vendor by having an appropriate tile in the appropriate marketplace, and they can just click. And like you said, Steve, that the template agreement is actually governing the delivery of your software. You don't need a procurement person. Your business owner can make that decision. You don't need procurement. You don't need legal. You get the price and you get the terms. We keep coming back to this marketplace concept and the cloud as your, delivery vehicle, but that's the future.
Brad, Steve, and I have a long background in sales and SAs, but we don't have a lot of experience on the marketing side, and that's one of the reasons why we're happy to talk to you today. So we have some questions about marketing and how you approach marketing as things change in the future. One of the topics that we talk about a lot on this show is technologies like Clubhouse, which is kind of a hot topic. And actually, I just heard earlier today that Clubhouse is launching a beta for Android. So that's closing a big gap there where they were iOS only for a long time.
Yep.
But how do all of these new tools coming out like Clubhouse, Spotify Live, Discord, just even podcasts, how do they change how you approach marketing of enterprise software and sales of enterprise software? I mean, do you think it's important for sellers to utilize these new channels because younger viewers that will be tomorrow's buyers that's where they are today, or how do you approach that?
I don't think there's a one size fits all. I can only give you my own experience. I just bought a car. I was not sold a car. The salesperson did not sell me the car. I bought the car. I did all of my research online. I actually listened to a few different auto podcasts, interestingly enough. And I had some specific features that meant there was only one car that I wanted, and I found it, and I went there and I bought it.
Was it a Bugatti?
It was
Brad's driving around in a Veyron now. It came with his own vineyard.
I don't think that necessarily the salespeople have necessarily grokked that change has happened, right? People don't want to be sold to.
Yeah.
They want content that will inform, and then they want intelligent discussion about that content relative to their business. And so I think there is look, content marketing and all that is not anything new. And any marketers that might be dropped in and listening to your podcast will be laughing at me as if I'm coming up with something new. It's like this is the way marketing has been going for more than a decade, right? Which is you put the content out there that's educational as possible. You try and make it informing. You try and want people to engage with the content to the point that they're comfortable enough to be ready to talk to a salesperson. The salesperson it's a much easier job if the marketing team is successful with that content. And look, Clubhouse, I have to tell you, I was invited. I was privileged to be invited to Clubhouse. I listened to one of them and I've removed it from my phone. I don't have time for all that nonsense. I really don't. So I don't know about Clubhouse specifically, but there's certainly other, there are other things, podcasts and, even just segments that are a YouTube video with a 10-minute round table on a particular topic with people that are experts in the space, preferably moderated by someone that's not paid.
Yeah.
Is what I want as a consumer. Someone that is marketing enterprise software has a job of making it as approachable as possible and that respect the intelligence of your potential buyer.
Well, I really want to drill down into this question about talking with people who aren't yet the decision makers or the buyers, maybe because they're younger or they're just coming up or whatever, and they're the ones using these new technologies by and large. So as a solution architect or a salesperson, I mean, how much time should you spend talking to those people who aren't decision makers yet, but will be eventually? I feel like we get so bogged down in, oh, we got to make the sale, let's talk to the decision maker, let's move up the value chain and all of that. But how much time should we be spending talking with those people who maybe 5 or 10 years from now will be the decision maker?
One of my favorite business books that you may have heard of or you may have read because it's a really easy read is called The New Kingmakers.
Oh yeah,
by Stephen O'Grady.
It's required reading at my company.
Right. Yeah, and actually in ours as well. Whenever you join the company, we give people a copy of it. And then he had a follow up related to open source called the software paradox. But the new kingmakers, I think, Chad, goes to your point, which is you might think you're talking to a decision maker and you are talking to a budget holder, but the decision is actually made by someone who might be fresh out of university and is the person that came across your technology for the first time. And it may be a developer, the new kingmaker, right? It may be a developer who starts using that technology and they're like, this does what we need. And ultimately, the budget holder is like, our team says this is what we need, right? So, I, I'm not saying that yes, you should go spend all of your time talking to all of the junior people in every organization. But, going back to the discussion we had around product-led strategies, it's like, if you've got a good product and you want it adopted, those people are very important to the overall sales motion. The old days where you could have a salesperson sell at the C-suite level and have that will imposed on the organization, those days are gone. Those days are absolutely gone.
Yeah, I mean, I think the path to becoming a decision maker and a budget holder is influencer, right? And developers, like you said, coming out of college or wherever, like I taught myself, so coming out of WebMonkey, which is where I learned how to code, believe it or not, I was an influencer. Like I picked products or open source projects and just started using them. Now, back then, there was no option to pay. Like no one was really charging other than Red Hat. But I think that's kind of the evolution of a developer. And if most companies, hopefully all companies, value every employee that they hire, and developers are no exception, then their opinions matter. And when they get on a call with a vendor, they want to have as much information as they can to be able to ask intelligent questions and, what gaps do I have that I don't know about? So I think it's really important to spend time with those folks, especially because I come from that open source mindset where I want everyone to be successful using our software, because even if they're not going to pay me, they're a potential customer, if not at their current company, maybe their next company, or maybe their next company. And I've done multiple deals now in my career where it was the same person at a different company buying software. And I think that matters. So about how much time, I don't know, but like I want them to be successful. And if they can't be successful after going through your documentation, going through your blogs, watching videos, tutorials, whatever it is, training, something's wrong. Either it's just not a fit or your education's not very good.
So what do you do at Lightbend other than giving people this book, The New Kingmakers? What is there some way that you operationalize the ideas that are in that book? Like, do you have people? I remember when I was at MongoDB, we all had to take turns on a rotating schedule of like, today's your day. You're just going to sit and answer Stack Overflow questions. Go look for any unanswered Stack Overflow questions about MongoDB and just help them and answer them. And we're going to help just the community create and also create that content. So the next 10,000 people who ask the same question will easily find an answer. Like, how do you operationalize those ideas of talking to these new kingmakers?
It's built into our model, and it's because we sell the software that is used by developers. This wouldn't necessarily be something that would work for all use cases, but for us, it works very well, which is that we have a business model based on annual subscriptions primarily. We've introduced some new cloud services, but it's primarily based on annual subscriptions where our customers, they get obviously all of our software, all of the open source they can already get, but then additional commercial software. But most importantly, they get access. And they get access to basically the engineering team. And we've been able to make that scale. And effectively, the value that a developer gets by being able to get their answers really crisply answered by somebody that is actually the author of the software is astonishing what it can do to get over roadblocks. And we're not just talking about, I have a bug, can you fix it? We're talking about how-to questions, best practices questions, integration questions, all sorts of things. Basically, you can ask anything you want. And we found that model, and that's a model that I know is not unique, but it is hard to have developers come on board and not worry that they're becoming a support engineer. It's like, no, it's not. You're a support engineer. This is engineering at Lightbend. Your job is to create great software and to make sure that people who are paying us money are able to make the best possible use out of it. Any of our engineers know that coming in, and they embrace it. This is where you get ideas from, is when you see how directly from your customers, how they're using your software and where they might be having challenges.
Months ago, Steve and I started talking about this podcast and could we create a podcast? What would we want to talk about? What kinds of questions would we want to ask? Who do we want to talk to? And and about having this sort of no nonsense answers that we talked about at the beginning. And we've been talking about this new sweet hotness with all this Clubhouse and Spotify Live and Discord and everything else. But Steve had a question that he wanted to ask that is about the opposite of that. Steve, you want to take that question?
I have been in a number of customer conversations with executives where someone will mention Gartner and what they said. And part of me, having been now on the inside to see how the actual Gartner-Forrester relationship works, it's pay to play. I didn't know that for the longest time. I felt like kind of an idiot when I found out. But I was like, oh, it's pay to play like everything. So I give you some money and you say something nice about me. And maybe if I'm lucky, you'll put me in this quadrant. And I just wonder, like, are those services still as relevant today as they were 10 years ago? And will they continue to be as relevant? Or now that we have access to so much information and like we've been talking about free services, open source, marketplaces, I'm now much more empowered to make my own decision without the influence from someone like Gartner or Forrester. Do you think they're going to have the same impact going forward as they have in the past?
Full disclosure here. Previously have spent a lot of money with Gartner. Previously have spent a little bit of money with Forrester. Currently are spending some money with Forrester to develop a TEI. And a TEI from Forrester is a total economic impact report.
Yep.
And strangely enough, in Snowflake's investor presentation, one of the things that they talk about is the total economic impact that they're able to claim based on the Forrester report. So it's obviously still got some relevance, even in a super hot company like Snowflake. But I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? And it's like in the classic crossing the chasm curve. Nobody in the kind of innovators or early stage gives one damn about anything that Gartner or Forrester would say. But when you're a public company, you've just IPO'd, you're valued at $60 billion, and you've got to continue on this amazing growth path in order to be able to show investors that you're on the right path. You need to be able to attract the kind of late adopters, the late majority.
Yeah.
And that's Gartner's audience right there, fairly squarely. It's people that want the world to have decided what's right first, everybody else to have taken the risks, and then they will go ahead and do it. And the magic quadrant, like you talked about, still has power. The other thing that I see is that there are other more boutique analyst firms. So we talked about New Kingmaker, Stephen O'Grady, the author. He co-founded RedMonk. They only care about developers, right? So it's like if you care about developers, you're thinking about investing in stuff for your development team. RedMonk is a great place for you to go with great research and specifically on that particular area.
Yeah.
Do they have the reach of a Gartner? No. Should they? No. Are they going to be more credible for that particular space? Absolutely, yes.
Brad, can we do some plugs? Can you tell us? Can you give us tell us what Lightbend is? What's the 30-second pitch on akka for people who don't know?
Okay, so akka is an open source distributed computing framework. What does that mean? It means it was something that was designed from the beginning to be able to support hugely scalable, high performance software. Okay, so it's infrastructure software, so it's the stuff that you use in the middle to make things scale. That's why when you kindly read my bio, we talked about things like Starbucks. Starbucks, universal commerce platform. Every Starbucks transaction runs through a platform at the back end. Your stars, all of that personalization is all done by a platform built on akka. Disney Plus, they bought a company called BAMTech for a few $1 billion. BAMTech was a spin-off of Major League Baseball because they knew how to do live streaming. That's now the foundation for 100 million plus subscribers. akka is at the foundation of that. So it's that kind of scale. So it allows super high performance, very distributed operation, and it's been very widely adopted by a lot of the technology industry. And it is something that we're very proud of. Where we're going now is with cloud services, right? So try and democratize that, make it much easier for any developer to be able to use, and that's really where our focus is right now.
And you're trying to launch a new serverless-based product offering or something?
We haven't announced it yet, so my marketing EVP will kill me for saying this, but yes, no, it's wonderful opportunity because we're so, just thinking about the industry in general, we've been talking a lot about cloud services. I personally believe that, Steve, when you were saying you're hesitant to call it in 10 years, I understand, none of us are Nostradamus.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be such crap investors in the stock market.
Yep.
But think about what has happened and what is happening. And serverless in particular, there is a lot of heads. There are a lot of heads in the sand on serverless. The number one quote from AWS's reInvent last fall was Andy Jassy saying 50% of Amazon's applications are now written for Lambda.
Brad, I find it fascinating that you're talking about this because I've been doing some research on the low code, no code stuff that's been making a comeback now. It's been around forever, but these things they're accelerating towards each other, I think. There's also cost considerations. I was talking to a company that decided to kind of go big on serverless and they started moving a bunch of stuff over there. And then they got the bill. And that quickly determined what they left on serverless and what they put back in a Docker container.
And that is one of the big challenges because serverless today, function as a service, works extraordinarily well if you have a stateless application. But whenever you need data persistence, and suddenly your Lambda function needs to have a DynamoDB database that needs to be available 24/7 because you're writing a business critical application, that's a very different bill that you're getting, and pay as you go suddenly looks horrible. But if you can start
hold
to
on. Pay as you go is not horrible on DynamoDB. It is way cheaper than running your own database.
Oh, no question, Chad.
Sorry, I just had to say that. I had to defend my product here.
We love your product. We genuinely do. But, if you don't know how much of it you're going to use.
Well, anytime you're dealing with serverless stuff, it's very hard to estimate what the cost is going to be. And we go through these exercises all the time. And it's like, well, how much is this going to cost me? Well, I don't know. How many reads and writes are you going to do per second? How big is every item? Do you have indexes? How big are those indexes? How often are you going to access the indexes? How much storage are you going to need? How long is the data going to live? Like, we go through this massive thing. And it's so different than just the old exercise of, well, you're going to need like 12 servers and, that's $5,000 a piece every year. It's so much easier. When you start doing this consumption-based pricing, it's like, all right, we can get you in this window, and it's like it's going to be from here to here. I don't know. We don't know. Just do it and see.
In the last 7-8 years, I have yet to work for a company that doesn't have a sizing calculator as a product, basically.
Yeah, and they're never that good.
I know.
They're never that good. Yeah. So I'm like, well, we're still going to build a spreadsheet on the side because we don't trust the sizing calculator.
Well, and the funny thing is, like, I think the people that I hire and likely the people that work in sales engineering in general, they kind of pride themselves on their knowledge and being scientifically correct. But I've yet to meet a sales engineer that got a sizing exactly right. And one of the first things I tell people is like, you're never going to get it right. It's a swag. So just accept that now. It's a getting started point. And then as customers start to use the service, this stuff will become apparent and then it will start to right size itself. But if you try and spend even hours on this thing trying to get it right, like, it's a Sisyphean task, in my opinion.
So, Brad, you're also on the board of Permission.io. What is that business?
How I got into it is a funny story. I'll tell you very quickly because it's a classic software startup pivot. So before I joined Lightbend, I was doing some consulting for a company called Algebraics Data, and they had some absolutely incredible intellectual property called data algebra, which was being used to have literally orders of magnitude speed up in things like Spark jobs because of the way that it represented the data with algebraic formulas. So I was doing some consulting for them, in order to be able to, look at how they would take this to market, how they would price it, how they would engage with the big guys like IBM and Google and so on with this new offering. Then I started working for Lightbend, so I stopped the consulting. But I kept in touch with them. After a few months, they did a complete pivot, and they're using the data algebra technology as kind of foundational. But what they have built is a blockchain-based cryptocurrency model for managing users' data and allowing the users to be able to elect to have advertisers advertise to them. And if they do, they get paid in crypto. The crypto is called ASK. So you ask permission, right? But it's the anti-Google, anti-Facebook. They're making money out of you and your data. No, you. The owner of the data should make money out of your data. And it's remarkable, actually. Permission just launched a Chrome plugin. I installed it and I'm running it. I'm doing a search, and I honestly forgot that I'd installed it. And I was doing a search, and I got this little window come up, and it says, "Oh, you're searching for sneakers. Watch this video and get 500 ASK." And that video was sneaker ads. So it was something it's like, okay, I am looking for sneakers, therefore I will look at it. It's not just some random ad for, steak knives. It was relevant to what I was looking for. So I watched it, and I got my crypto.
How much is 500 ask in dollars?
Well, right now, the future is bright. We're not on Coinbase yet. We could be. We've done all the things we need to be, but it's rather expensive to get on Coinbase. We're on 3 Asian exchanges right now, and one ASK right now is trading at about half of 1 cent. It's just so funny for me, a lifetime enterprise software guy, and suddenly I'm in digital advertising and crypto.
And since we're doing plugs, and if anybody found that interesting, what Brad was just talking about, our next episode is going to be all about crypto. We're going to have one of Brad's good friends, Kunal Anand, is going to join, and the boy wonder here himself, and he's going to talk all about crypto. We got a lot of questions about crypto teed up. I think we can turn our conversation over to some tech news that's relevant here, because Venmo recently added support for crypto. So if you want to buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I think a few other coins, you can do that through Venmo. And one of the things we were just talking about on, I think, episode 1 or 2, I was asking, why can't I just buy that stuff through my Chase account? Why are banks so slow to come to this? I've never really understood it, other than just a general reticence to do that. It seems risky to them, maybe. But it's great to see a big company like PayPal and Venmo, moving into the space.
Yeah, Venmo is surprising me about how pervasive it's become. I just had a notary at my house before the podcast, and I asked her how much to write the check for. She goes, "Actually, can you just Venmo me the money?" I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is just a regular old gal that works here and does notary stuff on the side, and she wants to be paid in Venmo." I was like, "This is awesome! Like, it's happening." So I think it's just a matter of time before things like this get added into those apps that are already pervasive, and it's just not going to be too long before everybody has access to it.
Yeah, but when is she going to say, "Can you Venmo me some Ethereum or something?"
I can't wait. I can't wait. We'll see. At the rate of Ethereum growing, like, I'm not about to transfer coins to anybody.
No, you don't want to convert them into Dogecoin?
No. Even after Elon hosts Saturday Night Live, no thanks.
I agree, Chad, but Venmo and Square and PayPal and so on. If you think about, they live in an electronic universe anyway, so fiat currencies it's just ones and zeros to them, right? So there's very little holding them back. I fully expect regulation of crypto to happen sooner rather than later, probably during this administration's first term. The mesh point of fiat currencies effectively owned by governments mixing with crypto, Alibaba, well, the Ant Group, actually, I guess it's still part of Alibaba right now, is now experimenting, letting their customers pay with the digital yuan, Chinese government crypto. And it's like, that kind of blows my mind, because suddenly you've got a cryptocurrency backed by a fiat currency, and it's like suddenly the rules of crypto go out the door.
It's not decentralized anymore. It's all centralized now in China.
Maybe years from now, we'll start to build sizing calculators that calculate the size of software in crypto instead of dollars.
Speaking of China, we're always bringing up these sort of Black Mirror types of things. Last episode, we talked about China forcing Apple to take H&M stores off all the Apple maps in China because of, they were criticizing the treatment of Uyghurs in China. Last week, it was announced that China launched an app for citizens to report anyone who has mistaken opinions or denies the excellence of socialist culture, essentially allowing Chinese people to rat on their neighbors when they say something that is against the ruling party. And I just find this to be crazy.
Yeah, it's a little bit freaky. Yeah. So I was encouraged a little bit about China when I listened to one of the Joe Rogan podcasts where he interviewed a guy named Josh Rogan, who's a reporter, basically. And he's been to China a bunch, and he's done some reporting on it. If I'm probably getting it wrong, but anyway, he was saying that in his experience, like the Chinese people, the average Chinese person that's just living their life in China, they're not that different from you and I, and they see what's going on, and they don't feel good about it either. So I just wonder how these things are perceived over there. Like, is it the few ruling the many with things like this, where they're kind of managing to the exception, and it's the people that would take advantage of this do, and their government's only enabling that behavior? And what's that going to drive? Is it going to drive a mass exodus from China? Probably not. Like, people aren't going to uproot their lives just because this one thing gets announced. And it leads me to this question of, like, at what point does the frog realize it's being boiled? And then once you realize you're being boiled, what do you do about it? My wife and I talk about politics, of course, in our house every once in a while. And we make empty threats about leaving the country if certain things happen. Now, I can't tell you when something happens in our country where it would actually cause me to think, okay, maybe I should seriously consider leaving US. I hope I never actually have to do that or would do that. But I do wonder if that same conversation is happening in Chinese households, where they're like, how many of these things have to get announced before we as a family decide to go somewhere else? And then if you think about that and you kind of pull that thread with modern day immigration policy in the States, at least until recently, it was very, very restrictive. And I don't see it getting too loose just yet. But if more countries start to become more closed rather than open, they may not have any places to go or not many places to go. And so that's also something that we have to be cognizant of. It's not just about China doing these types of big brother things and locking things down. It's also about what are the options for the regular Chinese person and where can they go and who's going to welcome them into their country. And, lately, there's been a lot of Asian hate, which I think is just absolutely ridiculous, but it's
Totally
happening.
ridiculous.
So, like, where can they go? Because if they come to the States, if they move to the wrong neighborhood or meet the wrong people, they might feel even worse because now they're hated just because they're Chinese. And that's also fucked up, in my opinion.
Well said.
Last Friday was my wife's 30th anniversary of them coming to this country and moving here, not knowing the language or anything else. And I hope that we continue just as a country to allow people in.
Yeah. I love it. I love the fact that we are a melting pot. I want it to stay that way.
A Netflix VP of IT was convicted. Now, this is a nice callback to our previous discussion about automating the procurement process. This guy was in charge of handing out contracts to vendors, and he basically took bribes from the vendors, and he made, I don't know, $500,000 in stock options and bribes on the side. I'm thinking, this guy's a VP of Netflix. Like, why does he need another $500,000? Their stock's gone through the roof. Why would you jeopardize your whole career for $500,000? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't get it. I think it's interesting that I've seen this. I mean, if you're honest with yourself and you're in a position of power, you've probably seen something in yourself that's like how easy it would be to start another company or give your buddy the contract. It's just easy, right? Like, who's going to question you if you have all the justification to do that? And I don't know how to test for this type of honesty in an interview. But I would imagine that and this doesn't seem to happen that often. At least people don't get caught that often because I don't see these articles very regularly. But I do wonder if, again, back to the marketplace thing, this stuff could get easier. Because if I start a company and offer a piece of software in the marketplace, but I also work for another company who's going to procure that software. I'm basically paying myself through the marketplace. And how is my company going to find out? How would they know? I don't think those checks and balances exist today.
So, Brad, you mentioned that you had recently gone through the process of getting listed in a marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Bribery, I guess, when you're talking about some sort of automated procurement through a marketplace?
I honestly had not even considered that being an angle, or even thought about any, potential manipulation. Well, I guess there's criminals in every avenue of life, I suppose. But
Reddit launched a Clubhouse competitor called Reddit Talk. And so now we have all of these companies just getting into this space. Of course, Clubhouse, Reddit Talk, Discord had a rooms concept. Twitter launched Twitter Spaces. I think they were just repurposing some of the Periscope IP that they had acquired. And as an SA, I mean, I run a monthly Twitch show talking about DocumentDB, one of Amazon's database products. We go really deep into the product and people join live and they ask questions and it's really interactive. It's not just like a webinar type thing, but there's so many options now. I know other AWS SAs and developer advocates who are doing Clubhouse type stuff. I don't even know where to start, and I couldn't do all of them if I wanted to. So it's overwhelming, and I don't know how it's going to end up, and maybe there'll be just two winners in the end. But I find it fascinating, the whole thing.
content is king, Chad, and obviously you need to be in a position to be able to ensure that the content that you want to get to your prospective buyers is delivered in some form that they want to consume. For a certain class of technical person, Twitch is a brilliant way to do it. But I can tell you, if you were trying to get to me through Twitch, I would be like, you got to be kidding me, right? So then again, I'm of a slightly different generation to the people that are comfortable on Twitch. And 5 years from now, when the dinosaurs like me have all been put out to pasture, that will be the standard way that you engage.
All right, that's a wrap for episode 3. Thanks for joining us today, Brad. That was awesome. I don't even know how I'm going to cut this conversation down to be under an hour because everything was such a great, relevant point.
Oh, it was fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, for all of our listeners out there, we are trying to make this the premier podcast for people in the solution architect, pre-sales, technology sales roles. So if you can share this with any of your friends, let them know that it's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever else you get your podcasts. And we'd like you to share this with them and help us get the word out. We'd really appreciate it.
Right on. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks.